that record. Yeah, welcome to today's session. Today we're just going to be covering and going a little more in depth on the handicap index, what it means, how's it calculated, what can you do with it, or what should you do with it, and just a couple additional details that you all should know prior to the season beginning. Just a little bit of background on myself. For those of you who didn't attend any of my previous sessions, my name is Aaron Gureka, and I am the managing director of Club and Facility Services. And I've been with the CGA for about 6 years now. Started as an intern with the, at that time, CWGA, Colorado Women's Golf Association. And they liked me so much, they didn't let me leave. So here I am today talking to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And additionally, we have a great surprise today. So we have 3 additional staff members who you may talk to whenever you call the CGA offices if it's not me. So we'll go ahead and start with Kim. Can you just say hi? Okay, good. Kim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I couldn't find my mute, sorry. Yes, I'm Kim Bussey, Manager of Admin Services. Been here about 4 years, and yes, I usually get phone calls, lots of emails from golfers, or just any questions you might have, let me know.
Perfect, thank you, Kim. Next, we have Miss Hannah House.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm the Manager of Member Engagement. So if you call the membership phone line, you'll be talking to me.
Perfect, thanks, Hannah. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Kayla Regnery.
Hi, everybody. I am the new program manager for the CGA. This is my 3rd day, but I will be working with all of the youth programs and things of that nature.
Okay, well, thank you. I just wanted everybody to, if they do call the office, to have a face to put to the name when they do call, besides myself. Everybody hopefully should know me and has talked to me before. If not, look forward to our future conversations. Okay, so let me go ahead and get to sharing my screen here. I do have about an hour and a half worth of material. One of the fellow CGAers, can somebody give me a thumbs up that everybody can see my PowerPoint? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we have about an hour and a half worth of material, and we'll have different slides along the way where we can ask questions, things like that. So if you do have a question, either enter it into the chat and or save it for one of those slides. You'll know exactly what the slide looks like. And then at that time, you could take yourself off of mute and ask the question to the committee here that we have today. Okay. So lots of questions, lots of time to discuss things. Okay, so moving forward, welcome to Handicap Index 101, everyone. Okay, today's agenda. What's new in the world of gin? We're going to talk about a few things that kind of came out in the middle of the year and late last year. And then we're going to get into the fundamentals of a handicap index. And then we're going to figure out what we need to do before a round with our handicap index, what we need to do during a round or need to know during a round, and what our handicap index and our score that we post do and what happens to that score after we post it. So we're going to take you on a little journey today, a golfer-esque journey, very high level. Although if you are a math lover, there will be some slides for you, so be prepared. Grab your pencil, grab your paper, do some math with us today. Okay, what's new? First thing, club certification update. All current active clubs here in the state of Colorado, if they have not been created this year, are certified for 2023, meaning the club does not need to take the rules of handicapping exam to certify. Now, that does not mean if you have a new handicap person or new handicap individuals overseeing the club, they shouldn't take that test. I would encourage them to take it anyway, not necessarily for a score, but just to see what they do and may need to work on learning based on the rules of handicapping. So not required, but if you have anybody new, I would recommend them take it just for their own benefit, okay? So there's no need to take it this year, but as of January 1, 2024, every club will then need to be required in the be required to be recertified in the updated rules of handicapping. Just like the rules of golf got updated this year, next year will be the rules of handicapping. All right, so be prepared. I will be sending out more information as the year goes on, maybe perhaps even have some information and opportunity to get it done at the end of this year. And then let's see, I have a chat here. The test will be whenever I decide to give it. More details to come on that, Phyllis, but most likely it'll be online. So we'll see, more details to come. Good question though. Okay. The USGA club assessment though. So this was sent out by the USGA themselves based on all 2022 contacts. This needs to be done this year. Somebody from the club, whomever the main contact was last year, needs to fill this out. And it's pretty easy. It comes pre-populated with the club name, the individual first name, last name, and email. And all you do is click the button at the bottom that says certify, and your club is good to go for 2023. If your club did not receive this, please let me know, because I now have the links and I can resend all the club assessment links. A lot of people thought it was spam. A lot of people thought it was scary and deleted it because they didn't know the sender. So I understand completely. So feel free to let me know if you didn't get this assessment and I can resend it to you. Get your club good to go for 2023. Okay. In addition to that, the club info forum. If you do have new committee members, new club president, new handicap chair, same committee members, new whatever, please go ahead and complete the club information form that we have on our website. Go ahead and head to coloradogolf.org. Under the membership tab, click on it. On the far right-hand side of the drop-down box, you'll see club information form. Click it and it'll ask you to update all your club officers. Once you have that, this way our record will show who a primary contact should be, who our club president or who handicap chair is, and things like that, and who we should be sending communication to moving forward in 2023. So if you wouldn't mind, and if you haven't done so already, please do that. Digital profile. This came out in 2021, so it's been a couple of years now. But in order to post a score on the GIN mobile app and GIN.com, all members must have a digital profile created. And the reason why the USGA and GIN introduced this is to better secure people's information, because before all you had to do was enter somebody's GIN number. You can see their name, their email, their address, potentially the scores they posted when they posted them, things like that. So there needed to be a little bit more security, just like if you enter anything nowadays. It'll always ask you for a username, password to log in, just to protect your security and your data online. So if you have golfers that don't have one, please make sure that they do. If they want to post via their mobile app or GIN.com, if they don't, and they have other people post for them, that's fine. They can proceed with that process. Okay, so after that, some people may be asking, well, how do we know that people have digital profiles? Well, if we go into the club, so this is a picture of our staff club here at Bushwood Country Club. And so I took a screenshot of our members here as of a couple of years ago when this first came out. And if you see here, everybody with a blue profile in this digital profile column, that means that they have a digital profile, they've created their password, and they're good to go. Here, though, that means anybody who does not have this little blue circle does not have a digital profile. So take a quick peek if you have access to the back end of GIN as to who does and who doesn't have a digital profile, and ask them if they want to post via GIN.com or the mobile app. And then if they do, make sure that you go ahead and help them with that process, just so they can be okay moving forward once they get out and start playing. Yeah, so just a heads up there. And then if you want them to kind of complete this process on their own, if we take a look here on the left, this is GIN.com. For everybody who has an existing digital profile set up, this is the way that they log in. And for those that are new or don't have a digital profile yet, they can go ahead and click this button and actually go through the process themselves here on GIN.com. And then on the right-hand side, this is a picture of the mobile app when you first log in. Again, everybody who has a digital profile, this is the way that they will log in. And everybody who does not, or who is just got a GIN number, new to the club and new to GIN, this is the way that they will proceed. So either administrators can help their members and do it for them, or they can kind of, or the member can go ahead and press these buttons and create their digital profile themselves. Okay, perfect. And now you may ask, if I am an admin, how do I help? So what you do is you go into their profile, right? You go into your roster, click their name, and you go into their account tab here, all right? Then what you do is under this primary tab, there is a whole section for their digital profile information. So what you're going to do is you're going to click one of these green buttons here. And if they're brand new to the system, they're only going to have one green button that you are able to press. And that will say generate digital profile link, and it'll automatically send create digital profile email to whatever the email address is here. Now, what a lot of people may be doing because they haven't used the GIN app in a while or GIN.com in a while, or they're like, oh, I lost my password book. I have no idea what my password is anymore to GIN. Because if they're like me, nobody writes anything down anymore. They're like, oh, I'll remember it. Maybe not. So what you'll need to do if you have this access is send that individual a send reset password email. Again, just click this button. Oops. Just click that button and it'll send a reset password email to the email on file. No harm, no foul. They're good to go in less than 1 minute if they're able to click the link that fast. But one thing to note here, any of these buttons are only good for 24 hours. So if you send this email to one of your members and they don't click it within 24 hours, you will need to go in and do it again, okay? Because what the system does is it creates a token, if you will, that's only good for 24 hours. So then, again, like I just mentioned, if that token expires, you'll just have to regenerate a new one and send it on to the member that needs it. Okay, another big addition to GIN last year, kind of midsummer, if you will, I believe June, July timeframe, was the introduction of GPS. There's 2 different versions. The free version is available to everybody who has an active GIN number here in the state of Colorado and throughout the nation. So if you have an active GIN number, you are able to access this GPS here. So you're able to see all the courses that have been mapped. There still are a couple of those smaller 9-hole courses on the eastern slope that may not have the mapping or may not have had the mapping done yet on the course. So slowly but surely all the courses are being mapped. So I'm 90% sure that whatever course that you play, you'll have access to GPS for that golf course for all tee sets, all rated tee sets. But there are some clubs that, like I said, are not mapped yet, so then you won't have access to that, unfortunately. Now, with the free version, you do not have access to this screen over here and these 2 numbers here. What are those? So this means to the back of the green, this means to the front of green, and this means to the center. So you will always have access to your yardage from wherever you are to the center of the green. And if you upgrade to the premium version, which is an in-app purchase, so you would have to go through your iOS device to upgrade and your Android device to upgrade. It's not via GIN or the USGA or anything like that. It's an in-app purchase. And you do upgrade, then that gives you access to heat maps here, tells you which way the greens are breaking. It also gives you access to club selection and club tracking. So you can go in there and kind of track your yardages for each of your clubs and then change it as the season goes on if you need to, or this way you can kind of know what your max or minimum distances are for each of those clubs. So it's a pretty cool feature. Not a lot of people see any benefit in it, but if you do, again, there's a way to select the enhanced version of the GPS program within the GIN or within the app itself. Okay. And finally, this came out kind of late last year, is the ability to play games with other individuals in your group. So you can actually look them up and select the game you want to play, whether it's match play net, match play gross, and or if you just want to keep score for the group. Somebody just doesn't like keeping score or whatever, you can go ahead and keep score for them. And now as of January this year, we were able to post those scores for the group, which is pretty cool. So just an added feature for you to use if you want to. You don't need to, but I would encourage you to check it out, at least try it and see how it goes. And if you don't like it, you never have to use it again if you don't want to. But if you do like it, start spreading the word that it's available. Okay. All right. And finally, the last kind of update here that was implemented at the beginning of the summer last year is push notifications. So on the 15th of this month, that is when the score posting season opened here in Colorado. And you should have received a push notification from Jen, which actually came from me, saying congratulations, today is opening day for score posting here in the state of Colorado. And there's a couple other things that you will get a push notification for if you want them to. You can always choose to turn off push notifications, so it's just not another thing on your home screen you see whenever you pick up your phone. But the potential options you have are handicap index updates. You can get a push notification for that. Whenever score is edited or deleted by the committee, you can get a push notification for that. And or whenever your profile is updated, meaning address, phone number, email, whenever any of that information is updated, you can get a push notification confirmation for that. Okay, very easy. And then if you do want to update those notifications, you can actually go into the app, and there's a notification section in the app that you can manage these preferences. Okay, that being said, are there any questions on any of that information? If there are, feel free to take yourself off of mute and or type in the question in the chat box while I take a swig of coffee. Okay, your silence means that there is nothing. If you do have a question on any of that information and you think of it later, feel free to ask it on our next question slide. Okay, now let's get into it, shall we? The fundamentals of a handicap index. Well, before we learn about the handicap index, we must know what is governing that handicap index and what kind of created it. And so in 2020, there was the introduction of what is now known as the World Handicap System. Prior to the World Handicap System, there used to be 7 governing bodies of a handicap, meaning there were 7 different ways to calculate the same number to play golf, right? But all those 7 were like, hey, we really just need one way to calculate a handicap index that can travel anywhere in the world and play golf with anybody at any time, regardless of ability. So what those 7 entities did is they came together and created the World Handicap System. And they also created what they now know as the World Handicap System Committee. And one person from each of those 7 entities is a member of that committee. So everybody is there making decisions for the entire world, which is actually pretty cool. And when they came up with the World Handicap System, they wanted the game of golf to be inclusive and as attainable for anybody, regardless of age, gender, religion, regardless of anything. They just wanted to get everybody who has a small interest in golf to get out there, get a golf club, and be able to play golf on a fair and equitable basis with anybody at any time, any place. So one thing I want you to remember about the World Handicap System is inclusivity is key. Okay. All right. Kind of staying along the lines of inclusivity, they changed the minimum scores needed to obtain a handicap index. They wanted to make it easy, regardless, you know, people are still working, they play golf, not everybody can play golf daily. Maybe we get an opportunity, you know, once a month, once every so often. So instead of the previous 5 18-hole scores or 10 9-hole scores, now you only need a combination of 54 holes. That can be both 18 or 9-hole score combinations. As long as you have 54 holes, you will get a handicap index. Okay, there is no time limit to completing the submission of these scores. Again, for those who work, things like that, they might not have access to play golf every day or once a week. So they want to make sure that even if they do allow some time between scores posted, that will not hinder any handicap index mistakes or things like that. So no time limit to submit those scores. And it is strongly recommended that the initial scores are submitted hole by hole. And in my opinion, all scores should be submitted hole by hole to allow the system to do the work for you, to better assess the potential of that player. Okay. All right, again, staying along the lines of inclusivity here, the WHS increased the maximum index anybody can have. In the old system, the maximum handicap index for a male was 36.4, and for a female, it was 40.4. Now they took gender away from the equation, and now it's 54.0, regardless of gender. Okay, if you want to play golf, come play. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are. We just want you to have a handicap, and then we want you to see and be able to track your progress throughout your period of time playing golf, which is awesome, which is great. Again, it speaks to inclusivity and accessibility, right? Okay, now the calculation of a handicap index was made a little easier as well, because for those of you who have been around the handicap system for a little while, then you know how the old handicap was calculated. It was, you know, the average of your lowest 10 differentials out of your previous 20 scores. And then you take that number and you multiply it by something called bonus for excellence, which used to be 0.96, and you round to the nearest 10th, and that was your handicap index. Okay, what's bonus for excellence? I have no idea. Why is it there? It's essentially just a haircut. So in order to take away that confusion and staying along the lines of inclusivity and accessibility, the WHS committee thought that it would be easier to just kind of start fresh. So instead of taking that old equation and things like that, they decided to take the average of the lowest 8 differentials and average those out of your previous 20 scores, and that's it. That's your handicap index. Round to the nearest 10th, and there you go. You're ready to go. Okay. All right. So here's a screenshot of my differentials here. So just to orient you for a second, here, this column stands for the differentials used in my handicap index. So these are my previous 20 scores. Any score that has a star in this column means that that differential is being used. You can see the highlighted. And it will always, because a handicap index is a measure of a golfer's potential and not the average measure of how they're playing that day or around that time, the system will always use the lowest 8 differentials. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. I was on a call this morning and he asked that question, so he didn't know that. So very good thing to note. Okay. Moving forward here. Well, now you're like, okay, what's a score differential? Because a lot of new golfers, they actually think the handicap index is based off of scores, right? And that's almost true, but there's a couple more pieces of information that we need that are used to calculate our handicap index. So again, a handicap index isn't calculated using scores, it's actually calculated using score differentials based on that score. So the additional information we need to calculate a differential is slope of the tees played and the rating of the tees played, and if there was any PCC calculation, and PCC stands for playing conditions calculation. Okay, we're going to go into that here a little bit more later on in the presentation. Okay, but here's the first piece for those math buffs in the audience. So the score differential equation is simply 113, also known as standard slope, divided by slope rating of the tees played. You take the sum of that equation, you multiply that to the sum of the adjusted gross score that you shot that day, minus the course rating of those tees that you played, minus any PCC adjustment that were to be given from the system. Okay, PCC cannot be calculated by any one of us because that is the USGA's bread and butter, and I don't think they'll ever give up what that algorithm is. But we'll show you how what it searches for, what information it needs in order to be kicked in. Okay, so that's the score differential there. Okay, so some people are like, well, what if I don't have 20 scores? Well, actually, good question. There's a little handy dandy chart in the rules of handicapping here based on the amount of scores, starting with the initial 54 all the way down to 20. And based on how many scores you have, the number of scores the system or score differentials the system takes to calculate your handicap index. So if we look here, that initial 3 scores here, the system will actually take the lowest 1 score differential And in order to protect the field, if this person were to play in a tournament, the system will automatically adjust that score differential down 2 points, because is 3 scores really a measure of a person's potential? No, not really. Why do you ask? Because on average, a person shoots their handicap index 1 in 5 times. So that's not even 5 scores here, potentially. So the next score, you never know, that person can have a lights out day and then stay that way moving forward. So you never know. That's why the system kind of does that initial haircut. And then the more information that the system gets for that golfer, the less the system has to do to kind of estimate the potential of that golfer, and the less it has to kind of make any adjustments to that individual's handicap index. So as you can see here, the last time the system does anything is when a golfer posts 6 scores, because that's at that time, the system will then take the average of the 2 lowest score differentials and then subtract that number by 1. And that's the last time the system will intervene at all. And the more scores you post, the more averages the system will take to get that handicap index calculated. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look here. Here's an example. So here's my first 4 scores here, all right? So based on this chart, I have 4 scores, so the system will take the lowest 1 score differential and subtract 1 from it to give me my initial handicap index. So let's take a look. So this is a screenshot of gin.com. So of my 4 scores, the system is going to take my lowest, which was right there, that 5.5. Okay, and then what it's going to do in order to protect the field if I were to enter competition is subtract 1 from that. So my initial handicap index based on these 4 scores is a 4.5. Okay. Any questions on that? No questions. All right. That is what we like. Feel free to take yourself off of mute if you would like and ask it, or you can type it into the chat. Okay. Well, I hear silence. So,
Oh, I have one quick question.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
A real newbie beginner here.
Yeah,
So
no problem.
how did you get the 5.5? That was the differential between par and what you shot?
Correct. So remember, in order to get a differential, you need
Okay.
3 pieces of information. You need the score that I shot that day, the rating, and the slope of the tees I played. Right?
Okay.
And then you put all that information into that equation that we look at, and it comes up with the score differential here of a 5.5.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to double check. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Great question. Great question. Anybody else? Okay. Any CGAers have any questions there? No? All right. Perfect. Then let's keep this train moving, shall we? Okay, so now we have our handicap index. So what do we need to do before we play a round of golf? Or should I say what's done for you via the tools that we have available to us before we play a round of golf? Okay, course handicap. So there's actually 3 different types of handicaps that somebody can potentially have. So when somebody says, oh, my handicap is this, well, is it your handicap index? Is it your course handicap? Or is it your playing handicap? So we're going to calculate the difference. So right now we've calculated our handicap index, which is solely based on scores played from different tees. Now, in order to calculate our course handicap, or what it takes to play down to par of those tees, we need to know what our course handicap is. Okay. And for those of you who've been around the handicap system for a little while, know that this secondary equation here, again, slide for you math buffs here. The course handicap used to only be the handicap index multiplied by the slope of the tees being played divided by 113, also again known as standard slope. And then you round to the nearest 10th, or round to the nearest whole number, my apologies, and that is your course handicap. Well, what happens when you play from 2 different sets of tees, or when you're playing a competition from somebody and you're playing from 2 different sets of tees? The old system, you would then take your course handicaps, take the difference between the ratings of the two tees and subtract those, and you would either add the difference to the person playing from the back tees or take away the difference from the person playing the forward tees. That was also known as 3-5. Now that no longer exists, even though I get phone calls about it every once in a while, and I'm like, maybe you should come to one of my seminars. Either way, so that no longer exists. So the World Handicap System Committee was like, okay, how do we make this a little easier for people to understand? And so what they did is they took it out, kind of, but it still exists in the form of what we now know as plus course rating minus par. So now, whenever two people play from two different sets of tees, the math is already done for them. So there's no need for an additional adjustment. So now the course handicap equation is you take your handicap index, multiply it by the slope of the tees being played, divide it by 113. You take that sum and you add it to the sum of course rating of the tees being played minus par. Okay, this is a very important equation to know right here. Okay, so let's take a look at what this means. Okay, so let's take a look at the differences, if you will. All right. So on the left here, we have our scratch golfer defined as being a 0 handicap. So any, again, for you math buffs, anything divided or multiplied by 0 is 0. So as you can see here, whether they're playing from, or whether this golfer, male or female, is playing from 6,000 yards or 7,000 yards, their course handicap used to be a 0, even though the yardage is 1,000 yards different. As we all know, the further back a tee gets, the harder the tee gets, and so does the rating of those tees gets higher. Okay, so this really didn't make sense to me, although the math made sense, but it didn't make sense kind of outside of that, right? And so if we take a look at our 15.0 handicap golfer, again, the same trend can be kind of seen here. Yes, they're a 15 handicap, but when they take that handicap index and put it through the old course handicap equation, they were actually the same course handicap on 3 different sets of tees that are 600 yards apart, which is weird. And then the only time that they get an additional stroke would be when they play 7,000 yards, which in my mind, I really didn't understand why this was happening. But I was like, well, it's based on the math. You can't really argue with math, so here it is. But let's take a look at each golfer individually and see what happened when the WHS stepped in and added course rating minus par. Okay, so on the left, we have the old system, and on the right here, we have the new WHS rules of handicapping system. So now you can see our scratch golfer is only a 0 from the white tees. And as we go further back and increase in yardage, the harder the tees get, meaning the more strokes this golfer will need to play down to par. So the further back you go, the scratch golfer is going to need 1 stroke to play down to par. And then at 7,000 yards, the golfer is going to need 2 strokes to play down to par. And then conversely, if the golfer decides to play an easier rated set of tees as defined by the rating here, this golfer actually needs less strokes to play up to par, meaning that this golfer, instead of being, a minus course handicap, will actually be a plus handicap golfer. Okay, meaning that they are better than scratch based on the math from those set of tees. Okay, now let's take a look at our 15.0 handicap golfer. The same trend can be seen here. So the only time the course handicaps match from the old system and the new system is here on the white tees, right? And then the same trend, the further back this golfer goes, the more strokes that will be needed for this golfer to play down to par. And then fortunately for him or her, if they play from 7,000 yards, this golfer will need 20 strokes to play down to par. Okay, and then again, conversely, if they play an easier set of tees, the less strokes that they will need to play up par, or in this case, down to par. My apologies. Okay, so that was a definite big change initially, as you can kind of see here. And a lot of people did welcome this change, although really didn't understand it initially, but now people love it. So I think this was by far my favorite change. Okay, so now one thing I want everybody on the call to challenge themselves to do is to calculate their target score, meaning the score that they should shoot that day from those sets of tees. But again, remember, if you don't do it, that's okay, because you only play to your handicap index 1 out of every 5 rounds. So let's see how we calculate our target score, shall we? So all we do is we take our course handicap that we just calculated and you add it to par. Easy peasy, right? So here we have green, white, silver. Here's the ratings, the slopes of those tees and pars of those tees. And based on my initial handicap index of 15, here are the course handicaps I get. Okay. Now, if we do course handicaps plus par, so 70 plus 19, 70 plus 17, 70 plus 14, here on the far right, you'll see my target scores for each tee set. Another trend that you can see similar to our course handicaps is when you play a more difficult set of tees, you'll be expected to shoot a higher score. All right, now the one red flag that committees know is regardless of difficulty, if this golfer were to shoot an 84 in all of these, there might be something fishy going on there. So that's a red flag that should pop up for committees. They could be having good days, but if they constantly do it for the entire season and they play, you know, an easy set of tees and a hard set of tees and they shoot the same score all the time, you might want to take a look. Okay. All right. So now let's take a look at my course handicap example. So we have my initial handicap index that we already calculated in our first little section there of 4.5. Today we're going to be playing the green tees. Okay. The good thing about all this math is it's done for you if you use the Gin app. So don't worry if you're like, oh, my members won't do all this stuff. It's already done for them. Okay. So the rating from those green tees is 71.0. And the slope is 125 and par is 72. So again, for you math buffs, here you go. Here's some math for you. So this equation here is our course handicap equation. Remember, handicap index multiplied by slope of the tees divided by 113. You then take that sum and you add it to the sum of course rating minus par, which in this case is plus a -1. So that would come out to 3.978, which would thus be rounded to a 4. Okay, so my course handicap would be a 4. And since my course handicap is a 4, that would mean when we add that back to par, my target score for that day on those sets of tees would then be a 76. Okay, easy peasy. Okay, now as I kind of referenced a little bit earlier, there's a third handicap that you could potentially have, and that is a playing handicap. So far, we've calculated our handicap index and we've calculated our course handicap. Now, we are going to introduce something that used to be also known as the course handicap, but now the WHS committee renamed it the playing handicap. And all the playing handicap is if you're playing a certain game of the day that uses a percentage of your full course handicap, that is then known as your playing handicap. So the equation you can see here is course handicap multiplied by handicap allowance. Okay, say you're doing, a best ball and you're only using 95% of the handicaps. So what you do is you take your course handicap and you multiply it by 95%, and that'll give you your playing handicap. All right. And this is usually only used for competition purposes. If a competition committee is using 100% of your handicaps for that day, then what that means is your playing handicap and your course handicap are the exact same. Most of the time that'll be the case, again, unless you're playing different games where a percentage of your course handicap will be used. Okay, moving forward. Okay, so let's take a look at a playing handicap example, shall we? Here's another change. Notice that I'm using my unrounded course handicap number versus my rounded handicap. And the reason why is because in the new system, in order to get a playing handicap, that number is only rounded once versus twice. Okay, so that's why you always take the unrounded course handicap number you multiply that to the percentage being used for that event. And then you round at the very end, which potentially if you round once, multiply it by a percentage and then round again, you're rounding twice, which is less accurate in the World Handicap System Committee's opinion, and therefore could potentially be a one-stroke difference depending on where the rounding is done. So this was another little small detail, but it had bigger implications. Okay, so my playing handicap is actually a 3. Okay. All right. So now that we have our playing handicap, it's important to know where we get those pops or those handicap strokes, especially in net games of the day, things like that. And also for net double bogey. We'll get into that here in a second. Okay, so we have Kate, Nate, myself, and Simone Biles. What a group. This is a fantastic group. But anyway, so each of Kate and I both have a course handicap or playing handicap of 4. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Well, that means you get 1 extra pop or 1 extra stroke on the 4 hardest holes as defined by this line here, the stroke index line. Every single scorecard you see will have this line on it. And what this line determines is the difficulty of the holes throughout the golf course. Usually you'll see the odd numbers on the front and the even numbers on the back. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17 on the front, and all the evens on the back. Okay. We're very rarely, unless you're playing a 9-hole course, will you see consecutive numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on one side of the golf course. We can go into why kind of later if you want to, but for today's purposes, just know that's the basics there. So Kate and I both have 4 strokes or 4 pops, and we would get it on the 4 hardest holes. And so if we look here, hole 3, 7, 13, and 16 are the 4 hardest holes. So that means on hole 3, Kate and I would both get 1. On hole 7, because it's the 3rd hardest hole, Kate and I would get 1. On 13, it's the 2nd hardest hole, Kate and I would get 1. And on hole 16, it's the 4th hardest hole, Kate and I would get 1. I apologize if these numbers are a little small for you. But yeah, so hopefully that kind of helps there. And then Simone Biles here, she actually is a 10. So what does that mean? That means she gets an extra stroke or a pop on the 10 hardest holes on the golf course as defined by the stroke index line, which you can kind of see where she gets those as well. She gets R4 plus the additional 6. Okay. Any questions there? Okay, we have coming in on the chat. How are stroke index holes determined? So that's determined by the golf course usually, and they usually take input from the men's leagues and ladies leagues at the golf course. All 3 of those entities kind of come together and use scores posted and things like that, and all the tools available to them to determine stroke indexes. Good question though. Anything else? Anybody else? Anybody have questions about the difference between course handicap, playing handicap? Okay. Hopefully that means I'm doing a good job. All right. Moving forward here then. Okay, so let's kind of recap here for a second. So what have we done? We now know inclusivity is key with the WHS, okay. We know how our handicap is calculated, our handicap index, that is. We know how, based on our handicap index, how to calculate a course handicap. And if we're using a handicap allowance for that day, we know how to calculate our playing handicap. Okay, again, all this is done for you in the Gin app, gin.com, or Golf Genius if you guys use that. So that's a good thing. If everybody had to calculate all this stuff before they played, nobody would play golf. You know what I mean? So, okay, so now that we have all this information, what do we need to know during a round? Well, there's only 2 things you need to know during a round. The first one is the guidelines to most likely score. Okay, what is a most likely score? Why do we need it? When do we need to use it? Well, A most likely score is used when a player starts a hole but does not finish it, does not put the ball into the circumference of the hole. Okay, and so when that happens, the score used for handicap purposes is the most likely score. And then those of you who have been around Jen and the rules of golf for a little while and the USGA knows that they like to use a little gray area every now and then. Okay, and so here is an example of the gray area. Okay, because so what Jen did and the WHS committee has done is given clubs and individuals guidelines to use whenever they start a hole but don't finish it. Okay, so let's take a look. And all of it is based on the position of the golf ball. So if the golf ball is on the putting green, but within 5 feet of the hole, that golfer, if they pick up right there, were to take one additional stroke and move on. Okay, here's where the gray area comes in. Now, if that golf ball is between 5 feet and 20 yards from the hole, then you are to add 2 or 3 additional strokes, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay, now, if that golf ball is beyond 20 yards from the hole, here's that gray area again, then that golfer were to add 3 or 4 additional strokes, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay, so again, that's used for when a hole is started and not finished, and most of the time this is used for match play. If a match ends on hole 17 and the golfer decides to pick up 20 yards away, then they add 2 or 3 based on where they are, and then they don't even have to play hole 18, because for handicap purposes, good segue, whenever a hole is not played, the score for that hole for handicap purposes is net par, also known as par plus pots, okay, which if you remember to a couple slides ago, it's important to know where you get those pops, because on 18, if you don't get any pops, then your score for that hole is par. Okay. And let's say there's a couple courses that have reached out to me that 1 or 2 holes may have experienced some death on the greens based on winter kill or things like that. And the committee there at the golf course declares that hole out of play. The score used for that hole only would be net par, or par plus any handicap strokes received or given back on that hole. Okay. So whenever a hole is started but not finished, you use the most likely score. And whenever a hole has not been played, you use net par. Any questions there on those two? Those are pretty easy. And one thing that I need to mention on this one is there is no limit to the number of holes that you can use net par for. But the golfer has to have played the minimum holes to post that score. So the minimum holes to post a 9-hole score is 7. So in order to post a 9-hole score using net par, that golfer would have need to play 7 holes. In order to post an 18-hole score using net par for the final 4 holes, the golfer will have need to play 14 of those holes. Okay, so just kind of clarification there. Any questions there? We're kind of moving and grooving nicely. Okay. All right. I take it by your silence. We are good to go. All right.
Aaron.
Here we go. Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
is there a place where that graph was or chart can be found? You had it in the previous two slides back.
This one?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So that is in the rules of handicapping, and you can find it either in the book itself, or I actually have the entire book online that you can download from our website.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. If you need, if you want directions on where to find it, Kim, can you go ahead and actually throw the link into the chat here, if you wouldn't mind? So hopefully we can get that over in the chat for you, Beverly. So it'll take you right to the area where if you want to download it, you can. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else? Okay. The during the round stuff is easy. The hard part is playing golf. That's always the hard part, right? Okay. So what do we need to know after the round? Okay, so again, let's recap. We've calculated our handicap index, which turned into a course handicap based on tees being played, which turned into a playing handicap because we're using a little bit of a handicap allowance. We then learned where we get all our pops on the scorecard, and we now learned what a stroke index line is. And we've played our golf, right? Okay, now let's see what acceptable scores are. Okay, scores from authorized formats of play, right? Played within the rules of handicapping. Okay, scores in both match play and stroke play, including multi-ball, multi-team competitions where players have not completed one or more holes. Because again, when somebody doesn't complete a hole, what score do we use for handicap purposes? Net par. Okay. Scores on all courses with the current course rating and slope rating made during an active season, both home and away. So for those of you who don't know, the active season in Colorado specifically, each state kind of has their own. Some are seasonal, some are year-round. But in Colorado, starts on May 15 and ends on November 15. So just a heads up. Okay. Scores made under the rules of golf and the modified rules of golf for players with disabilities are acceptable scores when accompanied by at least one other person. Now, this one I get a lot of questions on. They're like, what if that person isn't playing golf? Excuse me. That is still a postable score. Because why? Because that person can attest to your score. Somebody else was there to see that you were playing by the rules, and that score is postable. Now, if you play by yourself and nobody's there and you're just out for a fun round, unfortunately, that score is not postable for handicap purposes. Okay. And then when a player follows a model local rule, even if the committee has not adopted it, that is an acceptable score. And what rule am I referring to? That is the rule of golf. That is the alternative option for stroke and distance. Okay. And just a quick update, Kim did throw that link into the chat for us. So those of you that want to go to the World Handicap System and download this rules of handicapping, you can certainly do so. Okay. All right. Moving on. What are some unacceptable scores? All right. So a score is not accepted or not acceptable for handicap purposes and must not be posted to a player scoring record if the player has been disqualified from competition for, it should say, major breach of the rules of golf that might have provided the player with a significant advantage, such as non-conforming club. So let me throw this example at you. So what if the golfer finishes his or her round and signs an incorrect scorecard? Is that score postable? Anybody? Yes or no?
No.
No. Okay. Actually, the answer to that question is yes. Yes, that score is postable because it's not a major breach. Okay, all they did was just sign a wrong scorecard. They did play all 18 holes of golf. Okay, so that score is postable. All right. Some unacceptable scores, though, that aren't postable are such things as foursomes or alternate shot, same thing. Scrambles, you can't post those scores. And when being coached by a PGA professional or a coach or a teacher, things like that. Okay. Okay. And now the treatment of 9-hole scores. So for those of you who don't know or who are new to the system, 9-hole scores are treated a little bit differently than 18-hole scores. So a handicap index is calculated based on 18-hole differentials. So what happens when a 9-hole score is posted? Well, when a 9-hole score is posted, it creates a 9-hole differential. But since it is only 9 holes, it's not quite eligible yet to affect the handicap index. So what it does is it waits in that player's profile there for another 9-hole score to get posted. At that time, those two then combine together using a little math that I won't tell you today. You can look up in the rules of handicapping if you would like. And it creates an 18-hole differential. And at that time, that is when that score would be eligible to affect the handicap index calculation. Okay. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but in order to post a 9-hole score, the golfer must complete at least 7 holes of golf, meaning they must start and complete each hole in order to post a 9-hole score. And in order to post an 18-hole score, they must complete 14 holes of golf. Okay. And then again, the remaining holes not played, say if it rains or thunder, lightning, whatever, net par would be used for any hole not played. Okay. Now, the one question I get on this, I'll mention, is can you combine 2 front nines on the same course? Yes. The reason being is because after you play 9 holes of golf and you post it, again, it creates its own score differential. So even if you play 2 front nines, 2 back nines, front 9, back 9 on the same golf course, different courses, as long as you post a 9-hole score, regardless of where you play that next 9 holes, those 2 will then combine and create an 18-hole differential. Okay, what does that look like in GIN? Well, good question. So if we take a look here, right here, any combined 9-hole score will be noted with a score type of N, short for 9. And it'll also show you the 2 courses that were played. And then if you really want to get into the weeds here, if you click this edit button, you can see the dates of both of those scores that were posted, the times they were posted, the scores they were posted. And if you need to make any adjustments to those, you can do so. If you accidentally post a 9-hole score as an 18-hole score, or an 18-hole score as a 9-hole score, then that score has to be deleted and reposted as a 9-hole score. Okay, so just a quick note there. Okay, moving forward. All right, now, if you want to have a conversation with somebody for quite some time, you can go ahead and talk about net double bogey. Okay, what is net double bogey? Well, net double bogey replaces what used to be known as ESC, and that is the maximum hole score for handicap purposes that you can take on any one hole. Okay, again, the old system, ESC, that was based on your handicap index. Whatever your handicap index was, that determined what the maximum score you can get on any one hole, whether double, triple, quadruple, things like that. Now, this is much more accurate in my opinion, because instead of based regardless of hole you play, now, depending on your course handicap, that determines the maximum hole score that you can take, right? Or net double bogey. So let's kind of go over it. So all net double bogey is par plus 2 to get to double, plus or minus handicap strokes received or given on any one hole. Okay, but why do they call it net double bogey? That's kind of confusing. Like net par, people have been using that for years, but when you introduce something called net double bogey, people are like, so you're telling me I can't get a double bogey on a hole? Or what exactly does net double bogey mean? So whenever I talk about or teach net double bogey, I refer to it as double bogey plus. Okay, because all you do in order to calculate your maximum score on any one hole is take double bogey on that hole plus any of those strokes that were given to us based on our course handicap calculation. Okay. So let's take a look here at a couple of examples. Let's take Kate May. We're using her scorecard from the 2021 Women's Summit at Zoom Country Club. As you can tell, this course is fairly easy except for the par 5s. Okay, and it helps that Kate's a pretty good golfer. Okay, and if I were to make you remember from a few slides ago that she was a 4-course handicap, and we're only going to use her front 9 for this example. And she got 2 pops on the front 9 on the 2 hardest holes as defined by the stroke index line, which is 1 and 3, which ends up being hole 3 and hole 7. And you can kind of see that here as well. So on holes 1 and 2, she parred, she's pretty consistent, but here on hole 3, it's a par 5, 555. It's never any good when you have 4 5s on the same hole. You have a 555-yard par 5. Never any good. Bad juju already. So that gets in her head. She starts thinking too much. There's water everywhere. She ends up shooting a 9 there. Oh my gosh. Well, let's get it back. So Kate starts playing better, stays playing better. And then hole 7 again, another par 5 gets in her head, shoots another 9, and then finishes strong here on 8 and 9. So there's actually 2 scores possible here And what I mean by that is there's one score that can be used for the event that day, for the tournament or competition, and one score that will need to be adjusted to be posted for handicap purposes. Okay, so those of you that don't want to do the math here, the total of this is 46, and that's the score to be used for the competition. Okay. Now let's see if there's any scores over double bogey that we may need to adjust down to make sure that the score doesn't affect our handicap index too much. All right, 1 is good, 2 is good. Oh, again, let's look at 3. So double bogey plus. So a double bogey on a par 5 is a 7. And it looks like she gets 1 pop there. So instead of a 9, for score posting purposes, the maximum score on this one hole that she can take is actually an 8. Okay, let's take a look at this other par 5, shall we? So again, double bogey plus on a par 5. Our starting line is essentially 7. And we see how many pops we get. So we only get 1 pop on this par 5 as well. So what does that mean? Instead of a 9, our maximum score for posting purposes is only an 8. So again, our score used for competition purposes is 46, but our score that's postable for handicap purposes is only a 44. Okay. Good thing this is done for you if you post scores hole by hole in GIN. If not, then you have to really educate members and things like that to do this on their own. Okay, so let's take a look at somebody who has a course handicap in between 19 and 36. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So this is player A here. All right. So player A shot a 68. And again, that's, oops, sorry. That is the score for competition purposes. All right. So let's take a look. Let's do some adjusting, shall we? So on hole 1, that's a par 4. I apologize if it's a little small here. And player A shot an 8. Again, double bogey plus, our starting line on a par 4 is a 6, plus 1 pop. So instead of an 8, the maximum hole score they can get on this hole is a 7. Okay. On this par 3 here, hole 2, player A shot a 4. So does this even get to double bogey? No. Do we need to make any adjustments here? Nope. So no adjustments needed for that. Oh, player A, again on this 555-yard par 5, shot a 10 this time. But player A gets 2 pops on this one hole. Again, our net double bogey or our double bogey plus starting line would be a 7 on a par 5. And in this time, this person gets 2 additional strokes, meaning that the maximum postable score on this one hole would actually be a 9. Okay, holes 4 and 5 are similar to hole 1. Par 4s with 8s, and they only get 1 pop, so they're adjusted down to 7s. Oh, here you go, hole 6, par 3, and player A shot a 3. Do we need to make any adjustments there? Nope, no adjustments needed. Okay, again, the second par 5. Par 5s are killing people here at this golf course today. All right. Our maximum hole score here, again, just like the previous par 5, is a 9. All right, hole 8 is similar to the other par 4s that we've seen so far. Now, hole 9, this par 4 in particular, because of its difficulty, this golfer gets 2 pops on this hole. Okay. So our starting line, again, double bogey plus. Our starting line is a 6 on a par 4. Now this time, this par 4 only, this golfer gets 2 pops. So we take 6 plus 2, which gives us an 8. So on all the par 4s besides this one, the maximum hole score was 7, but because the golfer gets 2 pops on this one par 4, because of how difficult it is, the maximum hole score on this hole only is an 8. Okay, so if we add all of that together, the maximum postable score for player A is actually only a 61, 7-stroke difference. So you can see if you don't do this, how different scores could potentially be. Again, that's why I always recommend posting hole by hole. So you don't have to worry about doing any math. You just play some golf. All right. Any questions on that? I know that was a lot. So how did you come up with the calculation for POPs? Remember, POPs is determined by a course handicap. Whatever your course handicap is, you were to get, say it's like 10, 20, you get those POPs on each of those holes as defined by the stroke index line. Okay. If you have more than 18, then you essentially start over again at 1. So 1 through 18, you get 1, then you get 1 additional on the hardest hole and on the second hardest hole if you were at 20. That makes sense? Like I said, if you want to have a long conversation with somebody, talk about net double bogey or double bogey plus. Okay, Michelle, are you good on that one? Okay, everybody else okay on net double bogey and how it's done? And okay. We're making good time. All right. I'm gonna close that. All right. So, oh, here we go. All right, thanks, Michelle. Glad we can clear that up for you. Again, if you have questions kind of about that, as you think about it a little bit, please feel free to throw it in the chat, or we do have another question slide coming up here in a bit. Okay, now we have our score. It's been adjusted. Now we need to post that score. Okay. With another update to the rules of handicapping is that instead of waiting for the 15th or the last day or the first, I believe it was, yeah, of each month, the 1st and the 15th, now handicap indexes actually update the midnight after the score is posted. Okay, so if you play golf that day and you post it right after, your handicap index will potentially be different that next day. So for instance, if somebody plays daily, they could potentially have a handicap index that's different every day. How different? It won't be too big, but it could potentially be 1/10 of a point different either here or there, which is crazy. Okay, but when you do post a score, the player should try to post a score as soon as possible after the round and before midnight that night. Because again, updates are triggered at midnight every night for everybody. But if you didn't post a score, there will be no update on a handicap index. Okay. And when this is done, this is to ensure that the score will be used for the playing conditions calculation, which I mentioned sort of towards the beginning of this presentation. And a player's handicap index, if a score is posted incorrectly and it affects it, can always be revised by the committee, and they have access to go in and make any adjustments needed on a score or scores if they're posted incorrectly. Okay. So let the calculations begin. Once that score has been posted, okay, the first thing that happens is right before the update happens, the PCC algorithm that's built into GIN, again, the USGA's bread and butter, kind of kicks over and looks at trends of everybody who posted a score from that golf course that day. Okay, and it was designed to be very selective as to when it would kick in. All right, the goal was for it to kick in at least 10% of the time, based off of last year's score information, which was 2.5 million scores, give or take. It only kicked in about 8% of the time. So it was working as designed. So the USGA and the World Handicap System Committee thought that maybe we should make it a little more lenient. So now one of the changes this year, which nobody would really see until it happens, is the PCC threshold has actually been increased to 20% of the time. So we'll see what happens. It's still early, but they're hoping that the PCC will kick in at least 20% of the time this year. So more to come on that. And it is very conservative in nature. It's only 4 numbers. It's either -1, 0, which most of the time it will be, +1, +2, or +3. If it is a plus, that means the golf course played harder those days or that day. And if it is a minus, that means the golf course played easier that day. Okay. And as I mentioned before, it's only done once a day. So if you post your score after the fact and your score was needed for it to kick in, oh, sorry, it's not going to kick in. So that's why it's important to post that same day, especially if the weather is kind of crappy or if it's windy or, superintendent's revenge, things like that. The PCC considers all acceptable scores submitted on a golf course, including all rated sets of tees for both genders. It requires at least 8 scores showing the same trend from golfers who have a handicap index of 36.0 or below. Anybody above that is kind of a little all over the place and their data isn't as useful to the system for it. Okay. And when a PCC is applied, it is applied to the score differentials and not the score themselves. And remember, why is it only applied to the score differentials? Well, because the score differential is what is used to create a handicap index. Okay, this is to ensure a bad day, bad score won't affect the handicap index too much. That's why the PCC was created. Okay, and it includes both 9 and 18 hole acceptable scores. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. I know this one might be kind of small if you're using a small screen, but actually PCC has its own line or its own column in GIN. And you can see that I had one here on 6/30/2021. I haven't had one since, so I had to go back a little bit to find one. But then I actually had one here as well from 6/10/2021. Again, minus means the course was playing easier, plus means the course was playing a little bit harder. Okay. And I kind of zoom in here a little bit on those two, just hopefully you can see those. And then it affected my differentials a little bit. Okay, now bear with me, it's on our final 2 things here. So as we all know, integrity is part of golf, but not everybody has those core values, unfortunately. So Jen and the committee built in a couple of safeguards to help prevent, what people know as sandbagging, right? So one of those safeguards is known as a ESR, or an exceptional score reduction. And so what is considered an exceptional round? An exceptional round is when the differential of the score posted is equal to 7 strokes or lower or better than your handicap index at the time the score was posted. Okay, and when that happens, an ESR or an exceptional score reduction will kick in based on how much better or lower that score was. Okay, so if we look here, here's a table. If that score was 7 to 9.9 strokes lower than your handicap index at the time it was posted, the system will already automatically give not only that score, but the previous 19 hole scores a -1 reduction, essentially decreasing that handicap index by 1 point. Okay, now if the score posted is 10 or more strokes lower than the handicap index at the time it was posted, the system will give that score and the previous 19 scores an ESR adjustment of -2, essentially affecting that handicap index and decreasing it by 2 points. Okay. But the good thing about ESR adjustments is they don't stay on your record for 365 days or anything like that. They are designed to be played out of. So if you have one amazing day, it might kick an it might kick into effect an ESR adjustment, which is fine, but then the next round or rounds that you play will not be affected by that ESR. Okay, so that's a good thing. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. So here's a quick example, all scores from 2020. All right, so we take a look here on 5/20/2020, on 5/22/2020. We have a 4.1 score differential, which kicks in an ESR of -1. Again, to not only that score, but to the previous 19 scores, even if the scores aren't being used to calculate a handicap index currently. Okay, so then we get back to normal here. We get back to playing where we are. And then all of a sudden, oh, here we go, 4.1 again. All right, so here's another ESR adjustment, not only to that score, but the previous 19. Oh, look, this little grouping here actually doubles up. So in these 4 scores, I actually get the benefit of having a -2 adjustment for those 4 scores, which could potentially, adjust down my handicap index a little bit. And then let's take a look. After that's triggered, the next 2 scores that we post, no ESR adjustment applied, and we're back to normal. Okay, so that's how an ESR works. So that's safeguard number 1. And this is what it looks like in the GIN system. ESR does have its own column. Good thing I haven't had one. Phew. Yeah, so for those of you who can see this information and are part of the committee of their club, they can see that this is where ESRs are located. Okay, and it could potentially help the committee when doing handicap review at the end of the year. Okay, before I get into our next safeguard here, another introduction, which was kind of used but not really in the previous system, is the low handicap index. Okay, the low handicap index, there's a bubble in your handicap or in your GIN app right now next to your current handicap index that'll say low handicap index and a date underneath that as to when it was achieved. Okay, so it's important to know you have a current handicap index and a low handicap index. You will be able to see at all times. Okay, here's just a note on the low handicap index. So on 4/25/2021, a golfer submitted a score which produced a handicap index of 7.1. The low handicap at that time was a 6.2. Okay, when the golfer plays again on 5/16/2021, the low handicap index of 6.2 would still be used for the cap procedure, even though it's more than 12 months old. Now, here's the key. Upon recalculation that next day, the new low handicap index would be set, okay, which could potentially affect hard cap, soft cap calculation. So, but until there's a score posted after that 365th day, that low handicap index will remain in place because all it needs is some information to trigger a handicap index update. So I get some calls saying, hey, why hasn't my low handicap index changed? It's been more than 365 days, but I haven't played in a while. Well, it's because you haven't had information in there to trigger a recalculation yet. So upon recalculation, that low handicap index will update and potentially affect soft cap, hard cap, and or regular handicap index. Okay, just a heads up there. And I did get a question in that I think could you review what is a score differential? The score differential, Phyllis, is calculated based off of the score posted, the rating of the tees played, and the slope of the tees played. You need all that information for a score differential, which, as we know, is what is used to calculate a handicap index. If we need to, at the end, we can go back to that slide, and I can show you that equation. Okay. Good question, though. All right, we're almost done, I promise. Hang in there. All right. So, with the low handicap index, what does that do? It essentially acts as an anchor to the current handicap index because there are 2 now safeguards, additional safeguards built in under the cap procedure that help or hinder your handicap index from increasing too quickly. All right. And what are those safeguards, you ask? Well, the first one is known as a soft cap, okay, which acts as a suppression device. So when I think of the soft cap, hard cap procedure, I think of, a molehill and then a wall, right? You can still get over a little baby molehill. It just takes a little bit more effort, okay? And then once you get to the wall, though, you're stopped. You can't go anywhere. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Okay. So soft cap can act, or it acts like that molehill in that metaphor, and it acts as a suppression mechanism. So essentially what happens is every time you post a score, the GIN software will automatically give that individual a bit of a haircut on that differential so that the handicap index doesn't increase too drastically based off of one score. Okay. And the soft cap is triggered whenever the current handicap index gets to 3 strokes over the low handicap index, which is why I call the low handicap the anchor. Okay, now, once the current handicap index gets to 5 strokes over the low handicap index, at that time, that is when you hit the wall and your handicap index can no longer increase. Okay. And then one note here is the soft cap, hard cap procedure will only kick in after the golfer has posted 20 scores. Okay, so if somebody's new, the soft cap, hard cap won't affect them until they have 20 scores in their playing history. So let's take a look at a soft cap example. The good thing about all this stuff is you don't need to calculate all this stuff by hand. It is done for you. Okay. So player A again has a handicap index of 10. His current 8 out of 20 average is 15.2. The first step that the system does is it subtracts the low HI from the current 8 out of 20 average. Okay, 15.2 minus 10 is 5.2. Then it determines how much greater than 3 that is. In this case, it's 2.2. And subtracts 50% of that, which gives us a 1.1, and subtracts it from the 15.2 calculated handicap index, giving us a soft cap handicap at 14.1. Okay, again, automatic process done for you. Now, so as you can see, it gives it a bit of a haircut. So instead of a 15.2 handicap index calculated after the score posted, it's a 14.1. And this is what it looks like in the GIN system. Now let's take a look at a hard cap. So player A has a low handicap index of 10, and his current 8 out of 20 average is a 17.4 now. Okay, so we always have to go through the soft cap to get to the hard cap. So let's look at that math again. So we take the 17.4 minus the 10, which gives us 7.4 this time. You then determine how much greater than 3 that is, which is 4.4. Then you take 50% of that and you subtract it from the current 8 out of 20 average, which is 17.4 minus 2.2, which gives us a handicap index of 15.2, right? Wrong. So remember, the current handicap index cannot exceed 5 strokes higher than the low. So in this case, it is 0.2 of a point higher, which won't fly with the system. So the system will hard cap this golfer at 15.0 until the low handicap index of that golfer has been changed. Okay. And this is kind of what it looks like, or this is what it looks like in the GIN system as well. Okay, one note there is the committee in charge of handicap oversight for this golfer can modify the current handicap index or the low handicap index if necessary, based on injury, or they haven't played for many years and they're just starting back up again, things like that. So as long as the committee deems it necessary, they can go ahead and make an adjustment. Okay, so those are the safeguards, right? So if you want more information, if you want to download the handicap committee guide, if you want to download the rules of handicapping, this is our WHS hub under the club resources tab here. You have all of these things available to you. I have handicap FAQs here as well, club requirements, seminar details. This is the third out of the 4 seminars. The one thing I would recommend if you are on the handicap committee at your club is clicking that bad boy right there and downloading the handicap committee guide. This gives you everything you need to know about providing handicap oversight. And if you just want additional information, again, handicap FAQs, frequently asked questions, club certification questions, WHS resources, old videos that I initially posted when the WHS came out. You'll find those there as well. Very good resource for all of you who are on this call. Okay, and then over here on the right-hand side, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you can download the rules of handicapping. Let's see, where is the rules of handicapping, man? There it is right there. You can click that and that'll automatically bring up a downloadable PDF for you if you want it. or you can click this and it'll also bring up a downloadable PDF of the committee guide as well. Okay, and that again, that URL is coloradogolf.org/World Handicap System. All right, I do have one last seminar this year, and that would be the Handicap Committee Best Practices, and that'll be same time, same place next Wednesday from 10 to noon. That one I do have about an hour and 50 minutes worth of content. Very useful if you are on the committee of your club, or if you already were at the first session and just want to do it again. Please make sure that you're signed up for this, or let me know and I'll get you in there. Yes, so with that, are there any last questions that anybody may have here about the Handicap Index? If so, please take yourself off of mute or type it in the chat, and the floor is yours. Or Phyllis, do you want me to go back to that differential slide? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thanks, Aaron, please. Thank you.
You got it. So here's the score differential slide. And this is automatically done by the system for you whenever a score is posted. And all it is standard slope divided by slope rating of the tees played. You take the sum of that and you multiply it to the sum of the adjusted gross score, also known as double bogey plus adjusted gross score, now that we know, minus course rating of the tees played, minus any PCC that would have been automatically given to that score if needed.
Aaron, is that found on the admin portal?
Admin portal, no. You'll need, all of this is in the rules of handicapping.
Okay.
The score differential itself, though, is found on the admin portal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find my screenshot of that. Yeah, so here it is, Phyllis. So it's right here. And if the differential has a star in this used column, that means that differential is low enough to be used for the handicap index calculation. Good. Okay, anybody else have any last questions about anything we talked about today?
Aaron, where can we find this video? The-
I'm not sure yet. We'll see where we put it. It'll probably be in the World Handicap System area there on the website.
Okay.
And it could potentially be on one of our emails that we send to the club contact that we do every month. So I'm not sure yet. It'll probably stay living in the WHS somewhere, and it'll probably only be sent out one time.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Phyllis. Anybody else? Terry, Michelle, Kim, Hannah, Kayla? No? Okay, well, again, right at 11:32, you will get 28 minutes of your day back. Thank you all for attending today's session. Yeah, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to send them to either myself, Kim, anybody at the CGA staff. It'll usually end up coming to me anyway. So thank you all for your time today. And if I don't talk to you, please have a great rest of your season or start to your season, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye now.